Before Jorge Masvidal would be victorious at UFC 244 and would be awarded a new belt titled BMF for baddest motherfucker in the game. Before Jorge Masvidal would hold the record for fastest knockout in UFC history, clocking in at just 5 seconds with a flying knee. Before Jorge Masvidal would climb to 1 million Instagram followers following his UFC 244 victory over Nate Diaz, and spend some time hanging out with The Rock while also talking some trash about Conor McGregor.
If he fights and gets a victory, and he wants this, and some of you fuckers are mean, man, because you know what the fuck I'll do to that little dude, bro. I'll fuck that little guy up, man.
The UFC is a new superstar fighter who's both bringing in the views and taking home the W's. Now, it actually makes me feel bad for Nate Diaz. I feel like he's just the guy they keep bringing out to fight their next big star. No shade to Nate, just saying, well, the guy gets so bloody. He's always losing. But he's just a dog who keeps on going. Anyway, we've covered a lot of rags to riches stories here on this channel, but Jorge, he barely even had rags. The son of a Cuban immigrant who spent a lot of his time in the US behind prison bars on manslaughter and drug trafficking charges.
Drugs. And you were in there for how long?
18 years and a half.
And that was here or that was California?
No, right here in Miami.
That was here.
Now, Jorge had a little FaceTime with his old man, but he learned on the schoolyard pretty early on that he had an innate talent for fighting. Dedicating himself to the sport with no money in his pocket, well, it was an incredibly huge gamble. He slept in cars, he slept in parking lots, and under the gym ring for years. Backyard brawls held by Kimbo Slice, they got him a reputation in Miami, starting back like 15 years ago. But now he's set to dominate mixed martial arts on a global scale. What's going on, guys? It's your boy Michael McCredden, documenting the life and career of Jorge Masvidal, aka Street Jesus. Here for you, of course, and before they're famous. Now, we've covered other famous fighters in the past, including Kimbo Slice, Nate Diaz, and Khabib Nurmagomedov. I hope I said that correctly. I feel like it might also be time to do a Conor McGregor after they were famous, but it feels bad going against my own Irish kind. If you guys want to see that video, you gotta let us know in the comments down below. Also, smash that like button just cuz. Now let's get into Jorge. Not in a weird way, just the video. Hey, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell. Boom! Jorge Masvidal was born on November 12th, 1984 in Miami, Florida. He also shares a birthday with my sister. I don't even know why I said that.
But I'm from Miami-Dade County. I'm a dirty South goon. Damn right I ain't no West Coast gangster. I'm from the MIA, baby.
Now, this kid, he was literally bred to brawl. He's got one uncle back in Cuba who was a security guard for Fidel Castro, and then he's got another uncle who's actually part of the rebellion. I'm imagining their Sunday dinners were a little awkward. They're brothers. His father, Jorge Masvidal Sr., was a Cuban-born refugee who escaped the communist country at the age of 15 on a makeshift raft. Now, him and his friends, they thought it would just be a one-day trip, but they found themselves lost at sea with no fresh drinking water for 6 days. Now, out of desperation, his dad, he bit into that of a bird who had landed on one of their paddles. He drank its blood just to quench his thirst. Now, after 6 days, they finally landed in the Virgin Islands, and from there, well, he eventually made it to the US.
15, he already had decided that, like, I'd rather die than have somebody tell me what my favorite color is gonna be, you know? So a lot of people say it, but not a lot of people mean it, you know? And sure, he got out at T thinking he's not gonna die, but the chances of him not making it were very high.
Only speaking Spanish, well, his dad, he didn't last long in the education system. He started working in construction before finding himself in a California prison for 4 years on charges of manslaughter. His dad, too, well, he knew how to throw down. Following this, he spent another 18 years in a Miami prison for drug trafficking charges. Now, before he was behind bars, well, Jorge Sr., he would keep a close eye on his boy alongside his Peruvian mother.
That I would remember. My mom, the whooping she gave me, that I do remember.
Yeah?
Yeah, she loved that.
Yeah, she used to
Your mom would be whoopings and he would be like talking about.
I was scared of him, but he never hit me. He just put me in timeout or take the toys away or wouldn't let me watch Kung Fu flicks or something. But Mama Dukes would hand out the wow, you know?
Jorge Jr., he started fighting pretty early on as a kid, getting started as early as kindergarten. Now, he grew up in poverty with his mom working day and night to keep food on the table, but still there were nights where there was, well, little to eat. Now, initially, he didn't know his dad had been arrested. This happened when he was 4 years old. His mom actually told him that his dad was in the army. Now young Jorge, he felt envious of his pops. He was traveling the world, he was making all sorts of money, while he went to bed hungry. Now while attending St. Brendan High School in Miami-Dade County, well, he was enrolled in the wrestling team. But during the summer after his first year, well, all of a sudden he got expelled. Now his mom was terrified that he was heading down a similar path of that of his father, and she told him that his dad had been locked up. And from there, well, at 14 or 15 years old, he would then go and visit dad in prison. Behind bars, Jorge Sr., well, he decided that he would do his best to mentor his son so that he didn't end up with a similar fate. Now, despite all this, Jorge, he would soon have his own brush with the law, and he'd find himself in prison as a young teen. Now, that seems to have been the wake-up call he needed. From there, Jorge began spending all his time in the gym and attending backyard fight clubs. Now, one of his first matches was at the age of 14, where he took on a 19-year-old, and a lot of people, well, they were surprised when he won.
What's up, buddy?
Nothing easy victory.
Y'all ready? Fight. What's up with the rest? Let's go, baby. Let's go. Don't worry about that, man. Sean Brady, let him get trapped.
Make a commitment.
Now, at the time, everyone referred to Jorge as Ponytail, and this included fighting legend and OG Kimbo Slice. Now, from there on out, footage of him fighting on the streets, well, it started to appear online.
I remember the first time I ever saw you fight, it was a backyard bare-knuckle fight in the Kimbo Slice days. That was the first time I heard about you. And then I saw you fight Eve Edwards in Bodog.
Yeah.
Remember Bodog fight? Yeah.
Those are golden ages.
Moving forward, Jorge, well, he forgot about school and he focused all his mind on training. He began to refine his fighting skills and stepped into the professional ring when he was 19 years old. He participated in the Fast and Fearless kickboxing event. He made his kickboxing debut in 2003. Then a month later, he debuted in mixed martial arts, which at the time was still a relatively obscure sport. Now, the money wasn't great. I mean, back in his backyard brawl days, well, he was lucky if he even earned $40. Now, speaking on these days and money being so tight, well, he stated, "It didn't matter where I slept or what I was doing, as long as I could make it to the gym and space out for those 3 or 4 hours. I was like a kid all over again, and I did that my whole life, and it's happened to pay off now." When his father eventually got out of prison after 18 years and some time in a deportation center, well, Jorge and Jorge Sr., they finally got the opportunity to play wrestle, and that's when he learned pretty quickly on where he got his skills from.
He's 51, and his hands were fast, you know, like ridiculously fast. I couldn't believe that this old man was so damn fast, and that's where I knew exactly where I got all my hand speed from, my genetics, everything was from this guy. Because man, he still has a good right hand to this day. You know, he knows how to take care of himself. You know.
Now, the fighter had barely turned 20 when he already had 3 wins in his record. And back then, well, his diet, it consisted mostly of McDonald's.
Not everybody could eat McDonald's like me and go compete, you know? I'll take McFlurry, M&M, and let me get a double cheeseburger with large fries. Okay. And let me get a Mac double with a Mac chicken.
Now, his first fight outside of his home state was his 6th fight, where he faced Brazilian Rafael Assunção. Then Jorge, he returned back to Florida, and a week later, well, he knocked out Joe Lazone. Is it Joe Lazon? Lazone? I don't know.
I can't get over this kid taking this fight on this short a notice against a guy this tough and getting through that first round and fighting like he fought and not asking for a couple of seconds to regain his bearings after that huge takedown, which the ref deemed to be illegal.
After 3 more fights with the AFC banner, well, Jorge, he signed to the Bodog Fight Club, where he had 3 fights and all of them he won, including one that was held out in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Is the ultimate goal for you to eventually fight in the UFC, maybe Strikeforce now, or are you happy with Bellator? And if Bellator continues to do well, would you be happy finishing your career with them?
My ultimate goal is no diss to any organization or promotion, is just to fight the best. I mean, I would love to say I'm in the UFC or in Strikeforce or in Dreams or in St. Google, but if the best ain't there, I mean, you know, unless I'm getting paid a ton of money, you know what I'm saying? I just want to fight the best, man.
He had 2 fights in Strikeforce from 2007 to 2008, performing with varying degrees of success. Now, he took some time off to compete in more local competitions before returning to Strikeforce in 2011. In less than a year, he managed to defeat Billy Evangelista and KJ Nunes. He headlined his first title shot against Gilbert Melendez, and it ended with a loss for him by decision. Now, 1 fight later, the UFC, they acquired Strikeforce, and thus he became a UFC fighter in 2013. Now, there were more wins than losses with Tim Means and Michael Chizia. I think I'm saying that totally wrong. Anyway, He also lost to lightweight Russian Rustam Khabilov. He won his next 3 fights against Pat Healy, Darren Cruikshank, those are names I can say, and also James Krause. And then there was a split decision loss against Al Uquinta. Now following this, he decided to go back to the welterweight in July of 2015, where he had been performing for more than 10 years. He knocked out Cesar Ferreira, and he chalked up 2 losses to Benson Henderson and Lorenz Larkin. He won his next 3 fights, with 2 of them being TKOs. That was over Jake Ellenberger and Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Now the other was against Ross Pearson. Now his winning streak was short-lived. Soon he was honored with the title shot against Demian Maia, and he lost that in a split decision. He also lost his next title shot against Stephen Thompson. From there, Jorge kind of fell off the radar for over a year. Now he was paired up against British star Darren Till, and it was supposed to be a cakewalk for Till. But Jorge, well, he had other plans. He threw a monstrous left hook that knocked Till out even before he fell on the ground. Next up was Ben Askren, who he managed to knock out 5 seconds into the fight, setting a new UFC record for the fastest knockout. And from there, well, a star was born. Alright guys, so we're just giving you the biography on this new fighter. Obviously, we're going to get more information as he becomes more popular, and maybe we'll update this in the future. You guys got to let us know who's next in the comments down below. How about Darren Till? I feel like that guy's he's going to be a big star. Anyways, let us know who's next in the comments down below. My name is Michael McCrud, and I'll see you guys in another video. Boom!